Yep. We're gonna try and jam a 401/425, I guess, Nailhead into the Roadster. That's the plan. That's what's happening in this video. It happened all of a sudden, and I just got off the phone with our friend Hugo, and this is a go. So we are gonna see if we can make it fit. None of this was designed for this motor. It is bigger than a small block Chevy, and we're just gonna see what we run into in this video to try and get it swapped in there. I know that we're gonna change a ton of stuff, so don't forget to like, click subscribe, hit notifications. I think this will be a fun one. Let's do it. Okay, so in order to get this thing in there, foreseeable problems. We're just gonna unbolt everything in the front. We're probably just gonna yard everything out the front. Definitely have to change motor mounts, transmission mounts for sure. I think steering definitely. The starter on this motor is on the driver's side, right where the steering's gonna be, so that will be in the way. The motor itself is physically longer and wider by a little bit, so there's gonna be some stuff. I think for now, what we're gonna do is just take apart the car, undo all the mounts. We're gonna cut off the old mounts unless I think that we can use those pedestal mounts still, which I kind of doubt it. In fact, screw it, we're just gonna cut everything off. Everything that was attached to small block Chevy, we're gonna cut it off. We're gonna cut the exhaust as well because that will have to be adapted. We're gonna have to order our new exhaust manifolds or headers. Yeah, let's start ripping her down. Me and Elliot are gonna get wrenching. Okay, so this motor does not fit. It does not fit. Everything needs to change. It's going to be a massive amount of work, but we're going to do it. You know why? Because nailheads are awesome. That's why. Let's have a look. Have a look down here at the pulley for the crank. The front of this motor, like if we had to, we don't have to run a fan. We could have an electric fan hidden or whatever, but that is our front of the motor. That needs to come back almost 3 inches for it to clear the radiator. So right here is our next point of contact, which is all of the steering stuff is running directly into the head. We have the firewall, which is like maybe 1.25 inches away from there, and we need to come back 3 inches, so that means this firewall doesn't work anymore. And yeah, so exhaust doesn't work, engine mounts don't work, tranny mounts don't work, steering column doesn't work, firewall doesn't work, distributor cove doesn't work, transmission tunnel doesn't work, gas pedal doesn't work, brake pedal might work. It might work. So anyway, that's what we are up against, but we are gonna do it. And so I think the first things first, I'm just gonna grab like the zip cut and I'm gonna start cutting everything away. You know, I'm not just gonna cut a part of the firewall away, I'm gonna cut the whole thing away because it was all, yeah. I don't want it to look like we were just trying to fit it in. you know, like it should have been built around whatever motor it was. They got built around that, you know, small block Chevy. So now we're just gonna cut it all away and rebuild it around the Nailhead. I'm excited that we're doing it though. Like this is gonna be, I mean, I think it already looks so sweet in there. Like that's just an interesting looking engine. The engine itself is cool, right? If you don't know Nailheads, this is the factor that makes it so cool, is that the valve covers are straight, like flat, like they go on top, right? Horizontally, they're not on an angle. Like every other V8 ever is on an angle. Nailheads aren't, and it makes tons of horsepower. It's like 360 horsepower, I believe. Like that's a stock one, you know, and it's on basically an equivalent of a Turbo 400, and in this tiny of a car, like this is gonna be fun, right? It was meant to move a massive Buick Riviera around. That's like 2 of these. So yeah, I'm gonna get started cutting. I'm just gonna like pull the motor and trans out, and then cut off the engine mounts, remove transmission mount, cut out the whole firewall, and remove the steering column. That's the other thing, is I have to actually make the steering column shorter. You know, the steering wheel is gonna be where it's gonna be. So I have to actually cut the steering column down and machine the pieces down, shorten it, make a new mount so that we can get around this larger engine. So, yep, okay, enough yapping. I typically don't use a big grinding stone on a lot of things, but if you've got some heavy weld that you want to tear down, the grinding stone works awesome, and then just don't go all the way. Come back at it with something else, but to remove your weld, I think the stones are great because you can actually even get a pretty nice flat spot sometimes, depending on how you use them. All right, so we've got the motor in, and it's pretty much where it's gonna be. We've got the space we need from the radiator. There's gonna be enough room up there, no problem. The brake master is still a non-issue, clears everything, super good. It's very tight to that starter, but it does clear. So we are good there. But as you can see, not a ton of room still for exhaust to be the same way that it was. Part of the reason why we had the hood side on it before was because it was just a small block Chevy, you know, and it was just gonna be like a clean look with the exhaust inside. But now that there is a Nailhead in there, we're thinking Lakester style header, plumbed back into the stainless dual exhaust out the back that Elio built, and that will solve one of our problems, being that we have no room to put exhaust down there. So that problem is solved. The next problem is gonna be steering, which means that there's a couple options. One of the options we talked about was cowl steering. We could have a very short steering column to a box that has a long shaft that comes right out the cowl, to a pitman arm that comes down, to a steering arm off of the driver's side spindle. And that is an option, yes. It's an incredible amount of work and expensive, but it is an option and it's super cool. But I think what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna just shorten the column a little bit, put a universal joint here, so a steering joint, and then I'll bring it around, so like kind of into the toe board here, so that we have another steering joint kind of in this area, hopefully hidden by our new exhaust, and then that will point down to our steering box. So hopefully we still only have 1, 2, 3 steering joints, which is like super common and totally fine. The less the better, really, because set screws and lock nuts and all those things, they're great and they work awesome. And there are safeties that you can kind of build into how you assemble them to kind of make them extra sure that they're not gonna go loose. But imagine having, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those steering joints. In a couple of years, when they have just a minute amount of play, they would be very loose because you have so many. So you try to keep those to a minimum. Always try and design steering so that you have the minimum amount of U-joints. And as soon as you exceed 2, you need a stabilizer, meaning another place to hold the, like, one side of the shaft or another side, meaning if you have 3 joints, you'll have 2 shafts, right? So that middle one will need to be stabilized. Obviously, the end ones are stabilized by the steering box or the steering column. But anyway, that's what I'm thinking about when we're mounting a motor, is all the things that are gonna change to get that motor in there. But one problem at a time. So I needed to know those things, and I wanted to tell you guys about it because this is how I've been kind of working through this problem. But the next step now is motor mounts. Once we're happy, like I'm happy with this motor where it is now, because it clears back here pretty good. It actually looks like it won't look too awkward at all. We're just gonna shrink the firewall back a little bit, make a whole new firewall there. We've got the clearance, like I said, up front here, so now it's time for motor mounts. The old motor mount was right here, and it was part of this steering box situation almost, so we've peeled all that away. Now what I'm thinking is just a very tight, clean mount that will pick up these 4 bolt holes. Maybe it's a plate that comes up and then just goes flat, kind of how we did the Cadillac ones. And then the rubber donut would be kind of right in this area, and the bottom of the bolt would be kind of here, pointing up. That's, you know, what I'm thinking, something like that, but in a little bit further, kind of nice and tight. Maybe I can have gussets come off of the side to strengthen it somehow. That's what I'm thinking, a tight little motor mount that is in line with the center of these 4 bolt holes on that motor mount, and yeah, something nice and tight and clean that'll clear the steering box. The other side has tons of room. Like if we were in Australia, or if we were in England or some other country that was, or no, England's the same side as us, aren't they? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, why couldn't the steering be on this side? You know, where there is no starter and there is no, you know, well, steering box is the problem, but Anyway, that's the plan. I'm gonna start doing a bunch of measurements, pull off those mounts, start off with the top plate. So the motor side, we'll make that one first. I'll just kind of draw it on paper, design it on our CAD program, and cut it on the Fast Cut. And then we'll kind of hover this, we'll bolt that mount on, we'll hover this, and then we'll design the other side. Buick, I gotta say I like your style. 3 1/4 inches, dead square for a bolt pattern on a motor mount. No messing around, no weird triangle pattern or anything crazy like that. Like that. Oh yeah, getting her dead.
Yes.
Elio's on the Fast Cut. We got some plate. We're gonna use up that spot right there. Make these Nailhead motor mounts. All right, now that Elio's got those mounts cut, I just got to figure out what, well, make sure the motor is leveled off first. It's, which way is it? Is this way? Yeah, it's pretty dang close. It's point whatever of a degree. Okay, so let's adjust this the other way to point whatever of a degree. Same as the motor. 0.2 of a degree. Yeah. Yeah, it's so close. Okay, there we go. That will be our bend angle for the motor mounts. We're going to do that right now. All right, so our top motor mount plate is in. We've got the rubber mounts there. I'm really happy with where everything is because even if there was to be a hood side, it's not protruding, you know? So it's nice and tight, it's nice and neat. It has plenty of clearance from the steering box. Of course, we will have to have the steering box removed when that bolt goes in, I think. I don't know if you can kind of, you might be able to get it in. Might be able to get it in otherwise, actually. It's all rubbery. Anyway, that's all good. Now that that's there, we can make a template and drawing for this other one. I'm gonna try and make it look pretty, but also make sure that it goes around the steering box nice, and hopefully it can just be a symmetrical piece for the other side. But if it's slightly different because of that steering box, I'm not really too worried about it. It is what it is. Can't see both sides at once. Asymmetrical goodness. Okay, grab the pen, the old paper, and get started on that. Okay, let's see if this fits. I just lost it. Whatever. Something like that. That's what we're going for. So this fits nicely in there, our rubber. That actually does fit really well on 1/4 inch thick plate. Oh! Oh, I'm a dummy. Whoopsie. Dang it! What did I do wrong? I just noticed this when I said, man, this rubber fits really well on this 1/4 inch plate. I sized this hole to accept the rubber here. That was the wrong thing to do because I've done this, I've installed motor mounts like this many times, and I should know better. It's actually the steel lip here that drops into the hole of the motor mount. And I sized it for the rubber that actually drops into the hole of the steel. My bad, my boo-boo. So back to, I'm not gonna remake these, I'm just gonna drill them out. But I will drill them out to the size of the steel here, which I should measure, and then we'll be able to see if we made motor mounts that work. Okay, quick tip here. This is plasma cut stuff. So you're drilling something that's been plasma cut. This goes for hand plasma cutting, CNC, doesn't matter. That area is a little bit harder, right? So it's especially important that your cut speed, if you're gonna drill the stuff, is slower so that it can get through it a little bit easier without heating it up. So heat is the enemy for all drill bits, right? And the harder a material, the harder it is to cut, the more friction's created when it's cutting. You can get the idea, it gets more heat, right? So this is something I drill into so many people because I feel like it took me forever to learn it. I just thought that drill bits were just garbage everywhere always because I always smoked them no matter how much I paid for a drill bit. But cut speeds is everything. So the larger the hole, the slower you gotta cut it because the outside of your drill bit is moving faster than the center of your drill bit. Does that make sense? When you have like a 1/16 drill bit, that thing can be just wailing because it's turning very close to the center, right? Stand in the center of a merry-go-round and you'll be turning slow. Go to the outside, you'll be whipping, right? So that's my analogy for cut speed and size of drill bit. Like, be conscious of that, and that's why a lot of people make this other mistake is that they buy a drill press that is meant for wood. And what I mean by that is you'll see all these drill presses and they'll be cheap and you can chuck whatever you want in there and they look the same as all the other drill presses, but if they have 2 pulleys at the top of your drill press, like those very common 3 different pulley sizes, if there's only 2 of those, you are going too fast. Like, a motor can't spin slow enough to cut steel in a large drill bit, even though it's a 1/2-inch chuck. That's a wood one. That's the only real difference, right? Same thing with a bandsaw that's wood or metal, is the metal one will cut slower so that it can cut metal. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to drilling, drill these out, smooth these out, maybe throw the welds on it, and we'll get them on there. All right, well, we'll call this take 2, I guess. Oh man, not my finest moment, but it happens. It happens. So now those fit in there beautifully. That is the metal lip. It's what we want. Oh, maybe that one has a burr. That's just a tight fit. Yeah, sits down in there, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, that is how it's supposed to go. Nice. That fits kind of perfect. Nice and tight against the frame all the way. Lots of clearance on the steering box. I think it looks pretty. Winning. Right now I'm just kind of like leveling everything. I just want to make sure the chassis is level this way, like side to side, left to right. Same thing with the motor, and get these mounts tacked on. I know the transmission's in the center right now. I just checked that. I don't care how long it takes. I want to get as close as I can get it. And every time you move it somewhere, it moves somewhere else too. So sometimes it helps, like these motor mounts. I think what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to tack one. As long as I've got the motor relatively level and relatively center, I can tack one side and then copy the other side, make sure it's the exact same, and we'll know the motor's at the same height both sides, which should keep it level. Yeah, take your time with this stuff. I mean, if the motor's crooked, it's still gonna run, it's still gonna drive, but I don't know. I just feel like if you're in a habit of a little bit of extra thinking, I'm not saying overthink it because it can be a detriment sometimes, but look at every problem from every situation or from every angle, and you'll be able to hopefully identify like differences early or problems early, and it'll hopefully save you time. A little bit of forethought. What's the next step before I do this one? Anyway, time to tack them on. I love the way they look. I think they're going to be great. I do think I should probably add some kind of gusseting along the side here. The amount of, I mean, it's 1/4 inch plate, which is great, but the amount of actual contact and weld is less than, I mean, it's going to be 100% fine, but I always try and overbuild. You know, what happens if this thing, like, you know, gets hit by a train? Is the motor going to rip out? All right, we are up under the car now, and I just threw the transmission mount from the old transmission onto here. These are a pretty universal urethane mount. They're a little bit slotted here, and they fit a lot of transmissions is what I'm trying to say. So we can use it here. These were our old mounting points to the chassis, and that's where this mount would bolt onto normally. But now with the different drivetrain, obviously that's going to have to move. But the good thing is we can still use this part of the mount. It fits this. It fits this. But what I'll probably make is I'll probably just cut these off and make new ones that go to this bar and to this bar. Maybe like a 90-degree piece here that's going to pick up those 2 bolts. That's what I'm thinking anyway. Should be good. So I'll make that up next, and then we should have, you know, all that tacked on, and then be able to put the weight on it, see how it handles the weight, where the ride height sits. It is a heavier setup, but yeah, I'm gonna start with that. We'll just get the, I'll probably viciously just hack off what's there so that it's just out of the way for us, and then start designing the new pieces, and then clean that up afterwards once we haul the motor and transmission out of here to do final, like, welding and whatever. That's when I'll clean the rest of that old mount off. So that's what I'm thinking anyway. Okay, so whenever I'm doing something like this, I am looking for critical measurements. There's a lot of things that you can kind of design after you've put down your critical measurements, like your outside profiles and like things like that don't matter right now. What matters is how wide is this part that I'm already going to use? What size tubing do I need to go to? How far apart is that tubing? How far apart this way is the center of this transmission? Like, those are the critical things, and then I'll input its level, and I'll be able to think about where the 2 bolt holes and indexing of these, of this transmission mount is going to be. So it seems complicated, but it's just one measurement at a time. You just kind of need to map your immovable measurements. Like, you know, take design out of it. These things need to bolt here. And if you think about it that way and make 10 plates, bracketing like this is simpler than it looks, probably. Okay, so the next thing I need is the center of my my transmission mount to a measurement here. So somewhere on this tube, I just need that next measurement. Let's see. So from the center of the transmission mount to the inside of that tube, Something you got to be careful with too is like, are you directly under it? Sometimes it helps to line something up, but I'm going to call that 5 inches. 5 inches. Okay, so that is the center of, oops, man, I keep breaking these. So this inside of that tube to the center of, I sometimes, if it's the center and it's like a little drawing, I'll put a little C there, a little C right on the, you know, the center of that is going to be 5 inches. So 5 inches. Oh, that's not a center. Nope. Five inches from the inside of that tube to the center of the transmission mount. I'll still need to measure back from there to the center of the actual tube, because then my bolt pattern here will be centered on that, and I can pivot it to whatever angle this is at. That's kind of the next step, right? We have all of our critical measurements here. We'll know how far this is on this tube by how far our measurement is there, with a little bit of math from the inside to inside here and the outside to outside here. We'll be able to figure that out. We know what size copes we need to have, but now the next critical measurement is how high is this in relation to that. It's not dead center on all this stuff. It's actually a bit low, so we have to figure that out next. What am I going to do for that? We will get a measurement, say, across the bottom of the transmission mount and measure to the bottom of this tube, since we already know the diameter of the tube. And then we will be able to do the math from the mount itself, like the mounting surface on this, up to the center of this tube. That's how I'm going to figure that out. So right here, it looks like it's like a quarter, but let's see. Well, this mount could be a little bit off, so we got to kind of make sure that it's same both sides. 266. I'm kind of hovering. It's about a quarter. It's about a 1/4 inch. So now we need a different drawing of this, basically. We need to know where this tube is. So we'll call this, oops, man. Okay, that's the tube, and that's kind of where it bends back. And then we'll call this, that will be this tube. Maybe I'll draw a couple of brackets here so you know what that all is, what direction that is. Rear. So we have all of these measurements that we need, but we need to know transmission mount. We'll call this the transmission mount. This space here is what we just measured, and that was a 1/4 inch in there. So now we need to figure out the degree of tilt that is compared to this, and we will be able to find that out with an angle finder. Where did I put it? Okay, I found it. This thing's so handy, but it's so little that I keep losing it. Transmission is on a 3.5 degree downward slope. And frame is on a 2.6 degree upward slope. Okay? So 2.6, 3.5, that's a difference of 5 I'm like 6.1 degrees. So that's the difference. That's how clocked our 2-bolt will have to be, because this is straight with our 2 bolts. We are going to have to clock this in relation to our piece by 6.1 degrees. That was the point of that. Hopefully it all makes sense. So that's our exaggerated angle of what we need it to do. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's going the right way. So this angle here, that is 6.1 degrees. So now we have, what we would like to know actually right now is the center of this to this. So that surface, so then we know where the center of this is, and we can actually twist our degrees from that. So what is the distance from this surface to the center of that tube? We're gonna have to be like, you know, kind of, well, I guess we could totally accurately do that. This is not flush with the bottom of the tube, but we could find out how much that is, how high that is, and subtract it from the overall diameter, and then get that, which I'll do. I know it's getting boring now, so we're gonna do that, and we're just gonna huck it all into CAD, make our little L brackets, and because we've spent the time making all these measurements, this is the same thing. If you don't have CNC, that's fine. Uh-oh. Oh yeah, good. You can hear me. Whew. I've been doing some bad audio boo-boos lately. So everybody can hear me, that's good. Yeah, whether or not you're gonna lay this all out now on a piece of paper, like template paper, or not, you've spent all the time with the measurements so that your time with the template paper is not wasted, and your piece will be your piece. Yes, of course, everybody screws up. I screw up, you've seen it today. But if you are detailed in your measurements, it will save you time, and you will get faster at that. So rather than being like, oh, it's close enough, or I'll remember to make that too big or too small to fix the gap or whatever, rather than trying to get good at guessing, just some of the things, critical measurements. That's what I'm trying to get at. All right, well, it doesn't look like much, but I do have quite a bit in here. Pretend this is the back of the vehicle. So we've got a kind of a representation of what this mount is. So the size tube this is, how far apart these 2 points are, and this represents exactly a 1/4 inch underneath the horizontal line of the tube. So a 1/4 inch under here is where that is at a 6-degree bend. And so now, because we have critical measurements in here, we can start mapping out the not so critical measurements, which would be the plate itself, like how far above the tube is it gonna stick? Is it gonna drop down? Is it gonna be a cool organic shape, or is it going to be straight jagged lines? Like, those are non-critical measurements. Sure, they're critical for strength, like you have to have those pieces strong, but these are critical measurements as to where things are going. So the rest of it you can do whatever you want with. One thing I noticed that we don't have in here is where does this bend take place, so that we can start using width measurements as to how long is this piece going to be, where is it going to end, where can we cope onto the tubes themselves. So I don't have a measurement from this back tube to where our piece is going to 90 into this tube, right? And there is an obstacle there, because I know that there's another tube that connects this layer of tubing to another one above it. So I'm going to go measure that now, and that will give me the rest of the measurements that I need. I'll be able to figure out where this bend is going to be, because I'll know where the obstacle is. And we already know how far away it's got to be based on the measurements that we took earlier, like the width in between this point to this point are 14 and 7/8, and the width of the outside to outside of our mount itself, which is 9 1/16. So I'm gonna go measure that, and we'll just keep on going and cut these out. Well, let's see, let's see if I've got all the eggs on my face for preaching about critical measurements and stuff. All right. Try and center this as best I can. About there. This one. Leave a little bit wiggles, Now, this piece should be fitting here like that. Now, either it's too far over to this side or this might be a little bit long. I did add a 1/4 inch on here for this right here, and it looks like it kind of overlapped a bit, so that could be a little bit of it, perhaps, but yeah, perhaps. Kind of tight on the tube also. Like our piece isn't sliding all the way on here. Let's see what this other one is. Oh yeah, definitely too long. So some kind of measurement got screwed up there. I think me adding the 1/4 inch, oh, it looks like even more than a 1/4 inch. What happened? Let's put this centered-ish. Have a look here. Yeah, it's definitely more than a 1/4. Huh. It looks like about a 1/2 inch. Okay. I'm gonna nip this off, cut a 1/2 inch off, tack it back on, and we'll come back to it. Instead of actually cutting them down, which would be totally fine, I'm kind of thinking I might just put them on an angle. I can just have a look here and see about a 1/2 inch difference. Like I could measure to that and then just minus a 1/2 inch and put that on the angle. It'd probably even look a little better because I know there's an angle on the transmission pan too. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. 90 degrees are boring. throw a few tacks on this with just the MIG welder. It fits perfect. I love where it is. It's got a little bit of wiggle room, which means that it's not pushing too tight anywhere. So I'm just gonna give it a few tacks. The copes themselves are gonna hold the weight, but I'd like to obviously weld this in a better position with all these blocks out and that kind of thing. So I'm just gonna tack it. We'll definitely TIG weld this like everything else later, but just wanted to get her tacked up. Now we can actually remove the blocks. Like we're tacked in the front motor mount, we're tacked on the transmission mount. All these blocks can go. I'm just gonna do a big cleanup. We're gonna lower it down, let the weight sit back on it, see how it handles it. Nailhead's mounted. All right, well, what do you guys think? I think it looks pretty sweet in there. It actually fits really, really well, even though it's a little bit larger engine. We're gonna have to change a couple of things, just where our fan situation is gonna be, etc. But man, I'm just stoked to have a Nailhead in this car. I do love a small block Chevy. I have one in my hot rod, but it just feels like it's just a little bit more unique, Anyway, throw it in the comments if you agree with that, or maybe you don't. Like I said before, I'm having fun getting back on this Model A. We're making progress, we're seeing improvements. I love the car even more with that motor in it. It's got, motor mounts, tranny mounts, all that. We probably will add those gussets I was talking about and finish all the welding once we pull the motor back out so we can get a little bit different angle on it, that sort of thing. But thanks a lot for watching Make It Kustom, everybody. Appreciate you guys. Don't forget to like, click subscribe, hit notifications, and don't forget we are on Patreon. It's cheap and it's awesome and you get tons of benefits. We'll see you over there and catch you next time. Later.